Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Blacklogic. So on this edition, we're going to just explain the history to present day of the current environment and the situation that's occurring in South Africa with the alleged allegations and claims that President Trump has made about white South African farmers being genocided by the Black South Africans. And for this particular broadcast, we're going to just call him the commander in lies, or the lies in queef, because these were very wild, outlandish claims and allegation that almost every news platform has debunked this around the world. And one of the things I want you guys to question while I'm giving you this breakdown, and what you're seeing here is a historical map of South Africa being colonized by different groups. That part of South Africa, as you can tell, they've been colonized by different sorts of groups. They've been colonized by the Portuguese, colonized by the Germans, colonized by the Netherlands by the way of the Dutch. They've been colonized by so many different groups, but the Dutch are the ones who essentially stayed, and they're from the country of the Netherlands. But nonetheless, we're going to break down some historical references here so you guys can understand the current climate and condition that people are in today. So let's jump right into this, because I think it's important that we break this down first so a lot of you people can understand. Because what we're going to do, we're going to be pulling back the curtain on one of the longest running and most understood land grabs in modern history, the colonization of South Africa, and how Black South Africans were robbed of their land and their identity and, of course, their future, because majority of South Africans, Black South Africans, live in poverty. They live in squalor. They live in shanty towns. So we're going to be diving into how 7% of the population who are white South Africans came to control more than 70% of the farmland. Think about that. Not only do they own land, but it's farmland where they're growing food, they have cattle, so they control the very economics of the country to a certain degree. And how the roots of this injustice stretch back hundreds of years, because referencing the map here, the Dutch arrived around 1652, because in 1652, those so-called Dutch settlers or colonizers in this regard, under the Dutch East Indian Company, landed at the Cape of Good Hope. And the commander, who was, I believe, Jan van Riebeeck, the commander didn't come to settle initially. The VOC just wanted a refreshment station for ships sailing to and from Asia. But like all colonial stories, greed got in the way. Soon the Dutch started seizing land from the indigenous Khoikhoi people, we're going to call them Khoi people, or Kho, who had lived and grazed cattle in the region for generations. The Dutch called themselves Boers, meaning farmers, and later Afrikaners. They brought enslaved people from Indonesia and Madagascar and India, but the local African population also became victims of enslavement and dispossession. Now, if we fast forward to 1795, Britain invaded and took the Cape Colony from the Dutch. They gave it back briefly, but by 1806, they took it permanently. And the British introduced new laws and economic systems that further marginalized Black South Africans, including the Xhosa, the Zulu, the Sotho peoples. British land policies facilitated white ownership while pushing black communities, by pushing back black communities into labor systems and native reserves, which is basically a preview of the apartheid. And tensions rose between the British and the Boers. These two white different groups, the British and the Boers, who are from the Netherlands, who are the Dutch, leading to the infamous Great Trek, the 1830s to the 1840s, where Dutch settlers moved north and east, established the Transvaal and the Orange Free State. Those areas gained through warfare and the displacement of African kingdoms. Now, if we look at the 19th century, because the 19th century was marked by fierce resistance from African leaders like Shaka Zulu, who transformed the Zulu kingdom into a military powerhouse. Moshe Wee, who defended the Bosto Kingdom, and Xhosa chiefs who fought in 9 bloody frontier wars against British colonizer. Now, despite their bravery, European firepower, their alliances, and diseases decimated many of these kingdoms. Because don't forget, a lot of their gunpowder technology was their partnership and collaboration with the Chinese at the time. Now that we fast forward a little bit to the gold and diamond rush of 1867 through 1886, South Africa's land wasn't just valuable for farming, it was loaded with diamonds and gold. When these resources were discovered, British imperialism intensified. Mining magnates like Cecil Rhodes envisioned a British empire stretching from Cape to Cairo. They used laws, force, and manipulation to drive Black Africans off of mineral-rich lands and into mines as cheap labor. The Minerals and Mining Acts excluded Black people from ownership and skill work in their own country, on their own land that was stolen. Africans were now landless, taxed, and forced into the migrant labor system, working in hellish mines while white capitalists got rich. And this is very, very similar to the conditions of Black Americans. That's why when you speak about the apartheid, you have to go back a little bit further because there was things occurring that kind of led up to the apartheid. But the apartheid is quite recent, more so than all the other tragedies that people have been facing. And that's why, in some regards, South Africans and Black Americans in America, we hold a lot of relations in some of the atrocities that our ancestors have been through and some of the persecution that we're still facing today. We have our president, President Donald J. Trump, who on national TV with the president of South Africa made outlandish allegations stating that white Afrikaners, white Boers, white South Africans were being genocided, which was a big fat lie. The first question I have for that is, why didn't the Netherlands come out and speak against this white genocide in South Africa? These are the ancestors. This is the ancestors' country of the white South Africans. Majority of them are from the Netherlands. A lot of their language in South Africa is a mixture of Swahili and Netherlands and German to make that that white South African Afrikaners language. So when we look at the demographics of things and the allegations that President Trump made that almost every news agency has debunked, was this trying to be justified to bring over 59 unprivileged, seems to be impoverished white South Africans? I just don't know the answers to that. I just don't know the answer to that. But there must be a bigger ploy. Because again, when we look at the legal theft of this, the 1913 Natives Land Act, because this act, perhaps the single most devastating policy in South African history, legally barred South Africans, the Black South Africans, then 80% of the population, 80% of the population from owning land in over 87% of the country. So they were marginalized to only 13% of their own land to have their own farms, while the other 87% was owned, operated, and controlled by the Boers, by the white South Africans. This is just the history. This is just the history. I thank you guys for joining me here this afternoon, but we're going to break this down, family. We're going to break this down because, again, for people who are just getting around the story of white people being genocide in a Black-owned country, it's just a big headline that nobody really knows the history, and that the claims and the allegations that the president made are false. They're lies. And the picture that he showed, and I think I have a picture here to show you guys this picture that he showed to state that here are the bodies of the white South Africans that have been genocide. This picture is not even in South Africa. This is in the Congo. This is in the Congo. So again, we continue to see lies. Now, when we talk about the 1913 Natives Land Act, as I was stating that, 80% of the population were black from owning land in particularly 87% of the country. They were restricted to the reserves, just 7% of the land. And it's institutionalized land theft and racial inequality. That's like telling someone you can live here, but you can't own anything. You can work the land, but it will never be yours. It sounds like Black Americans in America, does it not? But I digress. So let's jump right into the apartheid, because this is important as well. Between 1948 to 1994, we're talking about racial capitalism on steroids, because the white minority National Party made segregation official in 1948 with the apartheid. 1948 to 1994. A lot of you have been alive through the era of 1948 to 1994. And we have present day slavery to a certain degree, definitely segregation by the way of the apartheid in South Africa. Because under apartheid, Black South Africans couldn't vote, own land in most areas, or even move freely without a passbook. The same thing we had was freedom papers. Or we had to have a signed permission slip to go from one plantation to another plantation, because certain of our Black ancestors who they deemed and labeled as slaves had certain skills. He's a blacksmith. Okay, he's a cowboy, because don't forget, the first true cowboys were Black. They're the ones who were tending to the agriculture, into the cattle, into the goats and all of those things. And they were doing cattle, they were doing cows, and they were being called boys, even though they were grown men. So those were their first original cowboys. You can do your research for yourself. This is not a wild, outlandish claim. So as we get into the thick of things, Black South Africans couldn't vote on land, okay? Again, without those so-called freedom papers. And the land was kept in white hands through laws like the Group Areas Act that forced removals of Black communities, totally moving whole communities. The same thing that is similar to what? Redlining. And what we're saying today is gentrification. What about the Bantu Authorities Act, creation of homelands to divide and conquer? The Lands Act of 1936 and 1955 reinforced earlier laws to limit African ownership and autonomy. By 1994, white South Africans, less than 10% of the population, owned over 87% of the land. And how do you think they got that land? You think they bought that land from the South African Black government? No. Don't forget, during the apartheid, the white South Africans, the Afrikaners, aka the Boers, they owned and operate every piece of the South African government that you can absolutely name. They own the infrastructure, the government, the economics, the food, the water, the resources. They own and operate and control absolutely everything. Absolutely everything that they had, they own and operated and control. And throughout that time, don't get me wrong, resistance never died. From the African National Congress, also known as the ANC, to the Pan-African Congress, also known as the PAC, from Steve Biko's Black Consciousness Movement to the armed struggle of the MKs, the South Africans fought back. Now, you had some co-opted leaders that is now coming out today, like Nelson Mandela. They said that he was co-opted by the white powers that was controlling everything. But you also had other people in the mix like Oliver Tambo and Chris Hani led into internal resistance. Meanwhile, movements like who? The Black Panther Party inspired solidarity across oceans. That's right. Black Americans were standing up for Black South Africans through the apartheid of what they were going through. We were protesting. We were giving outcries to our government to stop the genocide of Black South Africans and the control and the apartheid that was occurring there. Now, in 1994, the apartheid failed. Nelson Mandela became president. The ANC promised land reform. But here's the tragedy. As of 2023, 2024, over 70% of the farmland is still in white hands. even though whites only make up 7 to 8% of the population. Why? The willing buyer, the willing seller policy. It failed. Lack of political will and corruption. And we were talking about the elite capture. Black elites gain political power, but the masses remain landless. Underfunded land reform programs, because before the current president, I'm just going to call him President Ramsey. Before the current president, those puppets that the white power structure from Europe had in place in South Africa, that's 7 to 8% of people, of the white South Africans, owned and operated still everything. And even to this day, over 70% of the farmland in South Africa are owned by white South Africans. So again, one of the most important questions is, why is America involved in this? Why is our president calling out and making allegations that black South Africans are being genocidal towards white South African farmers or white South Africans altogether, where every news, it seems as though every news, not every, but it seems though a majority of news agencies from around the world stating that is untrue. Don't you think all these countries in Europe would have stated the same thing? They would have made the same claims. And do you believe that any of these other white countries, Spain, Portugal, Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, Italy, France, Norway, Greenland, Iceland, Finland, Switzerland, all these different people and all these groups have been to South Africa and have colonized them in some way or some form or some fashion, or through the illegal gold and diamonds trade? Why do you think none of them came out and solidified and verified the claims that President Trump has made? Because they were false. Because the first country that, in my opinion, that would have made claims or stood up or sent troops or made threatening terms to South Africa would have been the Netherlands. Because those white South Africans, a lot of their ancestry is from the Netherlands. That is their home country. They are the descendants of the Dutch who colonized South Africa. I'm just so curious of why no other country, no other white country, majority white country, has come out with the same claims. I'm just trying to break it down. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to break down a lot of the allegations that have been made. And again, the government introduced the idea of expropriation without compensation, EWC, which I do not agree with. Expropriation without compensation, I do not agree with, which terrify white conservatives and spark propaganda like white genocide claims. Like, we're going to take your land. We're going to take your land, and we're not going to pay you for it because that land was stolen. Your forefathers and your ancestors stole that land, and we're going to redistribute that land. We're going to reclaim that land and redistribute to the black South African families who land that it was stolen from. Now, and again, I don't agree with this particular policies, because you are basically persecuting the sons and daughters of those colonizers. And again, I get it. There's a lot of controversy here. There's going to be a lot of contradiction. There are a lot of people who are for or against. But in my opinion, they should compensate them for it. Should the land be reclaimed? In my opinion, I believe so. It's not your land. It was stolen. It was given to you by your father, but it was stolen land. But yes, you should be compensated so you can still go ahead and make a way of life. Because if I take your land and your cattle, your agriculture, all those things, what do you have to suffice your life? You have absolutely nothing. Then you're like, oh, it's on you. Your family should never stole land. I don't agree to that to a certain degree. I just don't totally agree with that. I know a lot of people may be against that. But that, the EWC law, that kind of sparked the whole propaganda like white genocide. But no mass killings occurred. No land was stolen. The claim is political theater, debunked by international agencies. In 2018, President Trump held up a gruesome image to claim that white farmers are being killed. That white farmers are being killed. The picture was not from South Africa, it was from the Congo. And it was taken by humanitarian works to show the horrors of war, not land reform. This is misinformation weaponized for white national agendas and anti-black fear-mongering. That is what this is about. That is what this is about. This isn't about hatred or revenge. This is about restoration, justice, and truth. South Africa's land was stolen at gunpoint and its people brutalized under racial capitalism. The current land debate is not genocide, it's centuries overdue conversation about human dignity. That is what this is about. Because really, if we really step into this whole land theft and genocide debate that has ignited fires across newsrooms, parliaments, and dinner tables, even here today, not just in South Africa, but across the globe. Should white farmers be compensated for land that was stolen from black South Africans? And should that land be returned to the descendants of those original landowners? That's the question I have for you guys. Should it be? Should the land be returned? I have a resounding yes on both accounts. I have a resounding yes on both accounts. Yes, the white South African landowners, should that land be confiscated by the government? Yes. Should they be compensated for their land? Yes. And again, I know a lot of people are going to disagree with some of my take here, but this is just my take. Because the current people in place wasn't the colonizers. Essentially, this is descendants of the colonizers. But first, let's acknowledge a brutal fact, right? Because most of the land owned by white South Africans today is the land that was stolen, plain and simple, and that theft was systemized through colonial violence, apartheid law, and racist policies, starting with the 1930 Natives Land Act and then reinforced through the entire apartheid era. But land reform in 2025 must do more than just correct the past. It must secure the future. So expropriating land without compensation might feel righteous in theory, but it risks economic instability, capital flight, backlash that undermines the land redistribution movement, violent propaganda like the white genocide lie that is somehow gaining traction globally about all these white people being killed. Let me tell you something. Black Americans in this country have been persecuted, killed, wrongfully imprisoned, and we have yet to have any black country come to our support and aid. We have yet any black country to come and say they're going to throw up military arms and start a war because of the black genocide in America. We haven't had that yet. But I do believe that if white Boers, if white farmers in South Africa are being killed, okay, unwarranted, you don't believe that a number of white countries will be on the footsteps, on the shores of South Africa, ready to start World War III, and we already knew who would win? I don't believe South Africa has any nuclear bombs. They would just simply send out a bolo and say, we want all white South Africans. We're going to send ships. We're going to send planes. Pack up all your belongings because we're going to destroy South Africa. Or we're going to infiltrate South Africa and we're going to make South Africa a white land again, a white majority ran land. Not the population, but who's in control of the land. I digress. Now, by compensating white farmers, The state preserved legal credibility while asserting moral authority. And that's what that's about. Now we understand that they got this stolen land by the way of their forefathers and parents. But again, as I state, we today going to need financial aid to a certain degree, compensation for that land, so they can then live a life in South Africa or any other country they choose and start other businesses. But the message is clear. We will fix what was broken peacefully, legally, and with dignity for all involved. That, in my opinion, should occur. Because let's be clear, compensating white farmers isn't rewarding colonization. Because that's what some people are going to think. Oh, that's rewarding colonization of what they did and what their parents did, etc. No. It's protecting the agricultural economy and preventing sabotage and buying peace without a future-oriented mindset. Because I'm telling you right now, if that land is taken without compensation, you're going to have majority white nations knocking down the door of South Africa, and it won't be a pretty picture, in my opinion. Farming is not just soil and tractors. It's networks, logistics, knowledge, and continuity. If we strip land violently, think about that. If they strip land violently from these white boas, they're going to risk collapse in food security, just like what happened in Zimbabwe during the early 2000s. That situation became a large humanitarian disaster. But a South African solution can be very, very different. Compensating farmers in structured, fair, state-driven programs. It's going to maintain international investment. It's going to keep the economy stable, and it's going to create a clean legal break from the colonial legacy. Now, here's the soul of the story, so to speak. Black South Africans didn't just lose land. They lost identity, sovereignty, and intergenerational wealth. That is why majority of Black South Africans live in squalor. That's why a lot of them are poor. That's why a lot of them live in shanty towns, in favelas around the world, essentially. It's because their wealth has been stripped and stolen from them. That's why. If we want to get into the thick of things, a landless people cannot be free. They can't build, farm, invest, or plan for future generations. Because as of today, we're talking about May 26, 2025, over 70% of commercial land remains in white hands, while Black South Africans are still packed into undeveloped townships, informal settlements, and homelands that was created by apartheid. This is a crime that never ended. So yes, it's imperative that land be returned to the rightful owners where possible through ancestral and tribal records, redistribute to descendants and family members of those disposed, used to empower new Black farmers, cooperatives, and food sovereignty projects, developed with state support, education, and resources to ensure that the new landowners can succeed. South Africa must invest in land restitution courts to investigate and resolve claims, state-backed banks and training programs to help new landowners transition into agricultural or residential land use, as well as a land audit system to track land origins, ownership transitions, and outcomes. And last, public-private partnerships that support transformation without destroying agriculture output. This isn't utopia. It's happening in countries like Namibia, Rwanda, and even in Brazil in various ways. As I was talking about favelas, those are mostly in Brazil. But South Africa must do it bigger and better, because it would, in some regards, it would be more deeper and more visible. And from a global standpoint, land reform efforts that include compensations have gained legal standing at the UN, that avoided trade sanctions and create successful, stable transitions in places like East Germany. There's a lot to say here. This isn't just about correcting a historical wrong. It's about reclaiming the birthright of a people without destroying the house in the process. compensate the current holders, but empower the disopposed. Turn oppression into opportunity, turn stolen land into shared prosperity, and finally turn the page on the apartheid have been really ravishing the South Africans for a very, very long time. I just want to show you guys some clips because do you guys believe there's alleged claims that there are at least 2 white-only townships in South Africa? And South Africa is 90% black, more than 90% black, but there's 2 townships in South Africa that are whites only. Let me guys show you this very, very quickly.
So one thing that I've noticed about here and Orania, it's like way out of the way of a lot of different stuff.
Why is it important to have this town in South Africa?
Why do I want to move here? Because I like it here. It's nice here, it's quiet, the people are all friendly.
The Afrikaner is on the bottom of the feeding chain and has been under threat for quite a number of years.
I came from Pretoria because I needed work and stuff, so I came here for work.
20 past 1 that morning, the train is going over me.
A train.
Now, let me guys show you this clip from the South African president on his take with Donald Trump in the Oval Office.
This wasn't about cooperation. He came to make me confess. Trump opened with a video about white genocide, aiming to convict me outright. The most absurd part, he cited the Expropriation Act to claim we are confiscating white land, willfully ignoring the fact that 7% of the population whites still control 72% of all farmland. Even more ironic, as he accused us of genocide, US police have already shot 327 Black Americans this year. When he grandstanded about admitting 59...
Let me tell you why that's very important, what he said about Black Americans being shot by the police, over 320 some odd Black Americans. And mind you, majority of that 300, we already know was unarmed. We don't even have to look at it. Okay. And if you want to, please do your research. But nonetheless, he pointed out to show that you're talking about white Boers in South Africa being genocide, which there's no evidence, no claims other than the alleged by President Donald Trump. But we have verifiable proof that Black Americans are being killed unjustly in America.
South African white refugees. I almost laugh the number is smaller than Florida's weekly deportation tally. This Human Rights Defender Act is just political theater for his extreme domestic base. Mid-meeting, he suddenly pulled out his phone for a selfie. Smile, I'm tweeting we're discussing white genocide. Later, when reporters asked about progress, he absurdly claimed, we just saved South African whites, just like I saved US auto workers, completely dismissing the trade issues we'd actually discussed. This wasn't about cooperation. He came to make me confess. Trump opened with a video about white genocide.
And I want to show you guys just one more clip. If you guys can bear with me, I'm going to show you one more clip because this is important as well.
Donald Trump just got the biggest shock of his life as the South African political opponent Julius Malema gave him a political slap right on the face after his white genocide claims appeared to be false. You won't believe what Honorable Malema just did to Trump. In this video, I will break it down for you. Before I start, touch the plus sign on our profile picture and give us your opinions in the comments section. In a political twist no one saw coming,
Now, before I let this play, I must warn you guys, I know a lot of you people are going to be against Julius Malema because of a song that he reworded of kill the Boer, kill the farmer. He has now rechanged those words to kiss the Boer. But for quite some time, they were actually chanting a song, kill the Boer. Okay, so again, I know this is not a good figure when it comes to international, okay, exploration of a people. But again, understanding what we just went over, how the apartheid even occurred, and through the apartheid, all the atrocities, all the wealth, all the land that was stolen. I'm not saying they're justified in their actions. I'm just saying understand the current climate of today in South Africa.
South African firebrand Julius Malema clapped back at Donald Trump and did it with the kind of cool defiance that left jaws on the floor. It all began in the Oval Office, where Trump dimmed the lights like he was hosting a movie night, rolling a video of Malema chanting, "Kill the Boer," and calling for white land expropriation. Trump's mission? Convince South African President Cyril Ramaphosa that a white genocide was unfolding. But Malema wasn't having it. "A group of older men gather in Washington to gossip about me," he posted on X, turning Trump's dramatic stunt into an international punchline. What did Trump fail to mention? South Africa's Supreme Court had already ruled that Malema's chant was not hate speech, but a political expression rooted in anti-apartheid resistance. Ramaphosa quickly shot down the genocide claim, calling it false and misleading, and billionaire Johan Rupert, also present, backed him up. "I've been Malema's target for years. This isn't genocide, it's politics."
So that is a lot of the accounts that particular song about kill the Boer, kill the farmer was anti-apartheid, that it wasn't to instill hate or to incite black South Africans to go out and kill white South Africans. So of course, a lot of people are going to be against that altogether. I have one more clip for you guys.
Death, death, death.
President Trump has made several false claims about violence against white farmers in South Africa in a tense meeting with the country's president. He played this video on a big screen in the Oval Office, saying it showed burial sites for over 1,000 white farmers. But it doesn't show burial sites at all. The crosses, in fact, were part of a protest in 2020 against the murder of 2 white farmers who were shot dead on their farm. Trump also held up a series of articles which he said were evidence of killings. He pointed to this blog post and said it showed white farmers being buried. But the image isn't from South Africa. It's actually from a report about women being buried in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Trump has repeatedly made a discredited claim that there's genocide of white farmers in South Africa. The country has one of the highest murder rates in the world. There were more than 26,000 murders last year, according to police figures. 44 were of people within the farming community, and 8 of those were of farmers. The figures aren't broken down by race, but they clearly don't show a genocide of white farmers as Trump claims. Earlier this year, a South African judge dismissed the idea of genocide in the country as clearly imagined.
All right. So again, news agency after news agency is stating that President Trump has made false claims about white South Africans being genocide of their farmers. Now, I kind of want to talk about some of those individuals they were stating, because they were fact checking here of the actual people who were being genocide. Okay. Now it states here, when a reporter asked May 12th why he created an expedited path for Afrikaners, Trump said because they're being killed and we don't want to see people being killed, but it's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about. Okay. So that was some of the kind of claims that he has made, but those have been overlooked because they're simply untrue. Now, it states here that the widely discredited allegation was amplified by President Donald Trump on Wednesday in an extraordinary meeting with a South African counterpart, President Ram. Ram said that the white farmers in South Africa were being killed and persecuted. So on Friday, the South African police minister said that between January and March, 5 out of the 6 people killed on farms were black and 1 was white. The white victim lived on a farm, while the black people who were killed comprised 2 farm owners, 2 employees, and 1 manager. Manju said that in previous quarter from October to December of 24, 12 murders on farms were recorded. 1 of the 12, a farm owner, was white. In that time, the South Africans' crime statistics have been broken down by race. But Manju said he had done so as a result of the recent genocide claims. Now, the reason why this is important, because nobody is going to believe any claims if you're on the side of Donald Trump and the white South African. You're not going to believe any claims that comes from the South African government because it's majority black at the time. They do have white judges. They do have white lawyers in South Africa. But again, from the government itself, is majority black, and no one's going to believe that. When I report from the FBI data, from the FBI Data Explorer, on the black deaths because of discrimination and racism in America, people are stating, well, we don't believe those numbers could become because it came from a liberal government that is still majority white. So who do we believe? Nearly Fuller told us. White supremacy take both sides of the argument. So you can never be right under a system of white supremacy. It doesn't matter if white supremacy even reports claims that they're doing a certain thing to a certain demographic. You're still not to believe it because one group, one side, one political party state that it's the other, and that they're telling lies on the other side. So Black Americans is a very, very dynamic demographic in America, because this is our homeland, America. We've been here from 1526 and beyond. Because when you look at those 100 slaves that they brought over, those Spanish conquistadors, Vasquez and his crew, when he stated that those 100 slaves back in 1526, this is way before 1619 that a lot of you guys have your claims on, but look up before 1619, there was 1526. You're going to see all types of stories that there were slaves already that were brought here. Now, when those 100 slaves rose up and revolted against their enslavers, those enslavers wrote in their logs that the black people that we brought over revolted and ran into the woods with people that looked like them, stating that there were already black people here in America. So when people tell Black Americans, okay, not first or second generation Caribbeans or Africans, when you tell Black Americans who roots stem here from 1500 to go back home, what I'm gonna go back to DC, I'm gonna go back to Georgia. What I'm gonna go back to? This is the only land I know. In that case, if you're gonna call Black Americans, African Americans, which I do not agree with Black Americans or American, however you want to look at it, then we need to start calling white people European Americans. Yeah. You're not indigenous to the land. So if we're African American, you're European American. But according to the Census Bureau, they don't have that dictated like that. They just have white. And if you're white, you're from these countries. But for us, they have African American and Black American. Oh, that came from Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson got it from somebody else. He just popularized it. And that was our downfall of popularizing a term with no claims and no connection of Pan-Africanism to any countries in Africa. So when we look at this is just solidifying why I don't take any political side. I don't take the Democratic liberal side. I don't take the Republican conservative side. The only thing I've stated is that Black people in general, we have a conservative mindset that is disassociated from the Republican Party. Is this the mindset of doing for self, wanting to work from self, hard work, all those things that we hold true, which stereotypical things, very stereotypical discriminatory things that's painted Black people as welfare queens. But you look at the statistics, majority of people on welfare are white people. Where they had stereotypical that Black people commit the most crimes or the most violent crimes in America, not according to the Department of Justice, not according to the FBI. And we're not talking about, whites have a larger population. No, we're talking about the percentages. See, if you go into simple numbers, then that's going to discredit the numbers. That's why you have to do percentage of that population. That is where you get the true numbers. And I'm not stating that Black people are better than white people better than Black people. I'm just giving you the truth. And that's why when you jump on board with one political party, you become a hoe. Yeah, I said it, because you're just agreeing and going along with anything as long as it serves your purpose, as long as it serves what you already or what you think you believe. Why hasn't any other white nation come out against South Africa of the claims of white genocide? Why only America? Is it because that the richest man in the world is South African? Is it because the richest man in the world is from South Africa and now lives in America and makes Tesla and makes Boring Company and makes SpaceX Is because he has millions of people who are fanboys and fangirls of his? Is that the reason? And that one of his best compadres, his best amigos, is President Donald Trump? Yeah, I'm talking about Elon Musk. I'm not saying he has anything to do with this, but I just wonder why the American outcry from the president, but no other country. Now, if they are making some of the same claims, please prove me wrong. Please send me a link so I can read the news story, because I just love reading. But out of all countries, why aren't the Netherlands, who are the homeland of these white South Africans, aka Boers and Afrikaners, why are they not making a big stink? Why are we not seeing huge headlines of what the Netherlands are going to do? We're gonna take our people from South Africa. We're gonna give you land here. Why are we not seeing that? I digress. I haven't done this in a while, but I'm gonna read some of your comments here. I see 906H2 is making a lot of comments. Mary Smith says she is Native American. Okay. From the pictures here, Mary, you seem more Caucasian than Native American, not stating that you are not stating that you are Caucasian. Let's see here. What will you notice are the major issues? Mary Smith said conservative. Okay. I don't, you just put conservative and a question mark. You know, I understand that some people may have questions about. Let me just pop this up for you guys very quickly. I want you guys to understand what I'm referring to. Now, unfortunately, the first thing that popped up was Wikipedia, but it states that conservatism is a cultural, social, and political philosophy and ideology that seeks to promote and preserve traditional institutions, customs, and values. The central tenets of conservatism may vary in relation to the culture and civilization in which it appears. It says conservatives largely support Christian values. Majority of Black Americans are Christian. And that is because of the, not only stemming from Africa, because when I went to Ghana, I found out a lot of reasons why a lot of Black Americans as well as Africans are now Christian. It was a two-part sort of propaganda meal of why a lot of Black people today, either in Africa or around the world, are Christian. Okay? That is because of slavery and the slave trade altogether. And then missionaries that they started to recruit that were from these African countries, they sent it to them Europe. I know this is going to be very inflammatory, brainwashed them. And then they went back to Africa and then they started to spread Christianity. Okay. Now, of course, you guys can believe that the disciples did it. Let me go on here. Let me pop this up a little larger. It also states that it says moral absolutism, American exceptionalism, while generally opposing abortion, euthanasia, and some LGBT rights. Because I want people to really think about when a majority, it seemed as though that a majority of Black Americans voted for Kamala Harris, and that was going to support a lot of LGBT laws when it comes to our children. And when that came out, that's why you see about 10 to 15% that usually would vote for the Democrats voted for the Republicans. So that wouldn't trickle down to our children and having transgender and other people part of that community that will influence, okay, that will influence the children. So when I say that Black people are more conservative in their mindset than liberal, the only thing you have to do is put up conservative values against liberal values, and then you'll see which one you truly are. Okay, that is my claim. That is my personal experience and my 2-eye research of when I'm interacting with different Black people from different statuses economically, have some of the same views. No, I don't want that. I won't use some of those inflammatory and very discouraging words that I've heard from family members and friends and other people associated with. It didn't matter if they was in the hood, ghetto, suburban American, living downtown, high, 6-figure jobs, 5-figure jobs, etc. A lot of us had the same values when it comes to certain of the liberal things that were being infused inside our Black neighborhoods. And secondly, we were totally against illegal immigration, especially parts of Chicago and other parts of the country were definitely against illegal immigration because they were dropping off illegal immigrants right there in Black communities that was extrapolating all the resources and pushing out Black residents in order for people who are illegally in the country to take and use those resources and live better than the residents with American paid tax dollars. So again, if you for people who are illegally in the country, who are illegally using your tax dollars for a better way of life, and simply because they say, oh, my child is over here, DACA, and that I should be anchored in, or I'm over here because I'm a refugee, but you see no civil war in Mexico of Mexican different tribes or Mexican different people fighting against one another, or that the government is persecuting Mexicans. And I don't want to make this is not a Mexican thing. I was only making it as an example because whether it be Mexico, Venezuela, El Salvador, Honduras, South America, the Caribbean, Africa, China, India, we have all sorts of illegal immigrants that came through the south of the border. I was just using Mexico as an example, okay? So please don't take offense to that. But nonetheless, if you were for that, when people were stating that they're come over here and taking the jobs, none of these illegal immigrants took any jobs, okay? They didn't take no jobs. Let's just be real. The American business people hired these illegal immigrants knowingly that they were illegal and fired American citizens because they got to pay you $15 an hour. They have to pay you $20 an hour. I only have to pay them $7 an hour. So I can essentially hire 2 or 3 for the price of 1. So I can get 3 times the worker versus the price of 1. I'm just going to hire the illegal immigrants. The American government is not cracking down on me. They're just going after the illegal immigrants. They're not going after the business owner, the ones who are employing them, the ones who are encouraging them to come over illegally. So yes, I stand by what I say that majority of Black Americans have a conservative mindset. That's why you have groups out of Chicago. One of the key figures of a group turning Chicago red, or Black Chicagoans go red, is P. Ray. I've had her on my broadcast a couple of times. And she broke down systematically why a lot of Black Americans in that Chicago area have turned red and voted for Republicans. But when it comes to this particular allegation and term, lies from the president himself. And you have almost every news agency stating that these were false claims and false allegations of South Africans, mostly the Black ones. So nonetheless, I thank you all for joining me here this morning. If you just tuned into the broadcast, I gave a whole breakdown of the history, even before the apartheid, leading into the apartheid and after the apartheid. I think be very fruitful for you to understand this very, very volatile situation, of which claims and allegation by our own president has stating that white South Africans are being genocide, which is simply through the evidence to be untrue. So thank you. You guys have a great and wonderful day. This is Blacklogic.